a country in northern Europe with around 5.5 million people. Its inhabitants are recorded to be the happiest people in the world, and the press is the second most free in the world, and it's a great place to live and work. But it didn't always seem to be that way. For hundreds of years, Finland was a part of big powers like Sweden and Russia. It seemed to be that way, but then World War I started. Finland was dragged into the war thanks to Russia fighting against the Germans. Let's just say it went really bad for the Russians. A revolution started in St. Petersburg due to the food shortage, and the king resigned. The Germans signed a treaty with the Russians to give reparations and independence to a bunch of countries, one of which was Finland. However, many people in Finland had no jobs or food, so they went on strike. A new political division formed, the Conservatives and the Communists. The Conservatives were referred to as the Whites, and the Communists were referred to as the Reds. Both parties made National Guards, and soon shots were fired. The Communists attacked the southern cities and took the capital, Helsinki, and began pushing northward. Both sides had an equal number of soldiers, around 85,000. However, the Whites had trained generals from the Russian Empire. The Reds were supported by the Soviet Union, and the Whites were supported by Germany. Both sides fought ferociously in battles like Tampa, but the Whites managed to win. The Germans landed in the south and started to push toward Helsinki. The war finally ended on May 15, 1918. The Finnish rebuilt their country after the war and sent former Red soldiers to prison camps. Finland also began modernizing. However, the Soviets remained skeptical of the Finnish. After the rise of Nazi Germany, the Soviets became increasingly worried that Finland would support Nazi Germany and attack Leningrad. So Russia demanded that Finland give 20 miles of their border, demilitarize them, and give some islands off their coast. Finland refused the offer, so Russia invaded on November 26th. And the Winter War began. The Finns had prepared for the Russians to attack. They dug trenches and they wore camo. The Finns had barely any planes or armored vehicles. The Russians, however, had no camo whatsoever, and they were forced down thin roads, the perfect place for guerrilla warfare. The Finns also rode very fast in their skis, and would place big logs to stop the Russian tanks. They even used bottles of gasoline named Molotoff cocktails, which was named after the Russian foreign minister. The Russian strategy was just to run in with thousands and thousands of men, and to hope for the best. A Finnish sniper known as Simo Heiha gained infamy for his 505 kills. The Russians named him the White Death. After all the Russians' defeats, they changed their plan. Instead of attacking all sides of the border, they would go for a strong push toward Helsinki. The Russians began winning battles, and the Finns were now undersupplied and surrendered on March 13, 1940. The Finns lost 11% of its territory. Although it was a Russian victory, it certainly felt like a loss, with around 168,000 Russian casualties compared to Finland's 26,000 casualties. When the Germans invaded Russia, Finland joined the Germans. Finland pushed forward just to take all of its rightful land back and then defended it. The defense succeeded, but when the Russians started pushing back against the Germans and the Finnish saw that there was no hope and surrendered. Finland lost another 63,200 men in another defeat. However, more Germans were up north. Finland was supposed to break diplomatic ties to Germany and force the Germans out of the country by September 15, 1944. The Germans refused, so the Finnish, with the Russians, attacked in the short Lapland War. This was a victory for Finland, and the Germans were expelled out of the country. However, Finland lost another 774 men. By the end of World War II, Finland had lost around 89,974 soldiers, a good chunk of land, and many towns that are now rubble. They also had to pay some war reparations to the Soviets. This industrialized the country, and the Finnish are right between the two biggest superpowers at the time, the United States and the Soviet Union. Finland was neutral but sided more towards the West. In 1952, they joined the Nordic League. On January 1st, 1995, Finland joined the EU. Finland adopted the euro in January 1st, 1999, and they joined the Schengen area in, you guessed it, March 25th, 2001. Finland is the 66th biggest country in the world, and it's the 116th in total population. But it has the second most number of lakes, mostly in its lakeland region. Finland is a very rich country with a GDP of 276.7 billion, which means that it has 50,152.34 GDP per capita, which is fairly high. All in all, Finland is a great, safe country to live, with an interesting backstory.